We as developers tend to live a pretty nice life and have pretty nice careers. I've done a lot of things in my life. I've been a janitor, I've worked in construction, I've done fast food, I've done gas stations, I've done a lot of different things in my life. And we tend to have a pretty nice life as developers. There's really no way around that, in spite of all of the stress that we do go through, because frankly, there is stress in our jobs. You know, we're well paid, we have these nice, cushy, comfortable chairs, these great laptops that we use, you know, all this junk up here that you see sitting in front of me that I use to record and advance my slides and everything. All of these things come to us from a pretty nice life. And when you start talking about the startup world and the developers going out on their own in the independent life, it gets even more crazy sometimes because you have all of this freedom and self-expression and self-control. But there's another side to the technology world that we live in. And there's been kind of an undercurrent of theme throughout the day here at this conference where we're seeing more and more discussion about the human side of software development and how important the human side of things really are, and how we're not just dealing with technology, but we really are truly dealing with people. And in my experience, people are by far the most difficult part of software development. I mean, it's fun to say, oh, stupid users, if I didn't have to deal with users and customers. But the reality is everything that we do is for our users, for our customers. Even if we are writing code for other developers, we still have users. They just happen to be other developers. But more often than not, we're dealing with, some other organization in our business. We're dealing with an actual paying customer, a client that we're building software for, and their end users, whatever the situation may be. And anytime that we are dealing with human beings, which is all the time, we have emotions that we deal with as well. Human interaction creates emotion, creates problems with emotion, creates good things with emotion, but there is emotion involved. And in the last few years, I've noticed that there's cycles of these emotions, and I've noticed that there's a kind of a parallel to what's commonly referred to as the 5 stages of grief in human emotion. Now, the 5 stages, if you're not familiar with it, is typically a part of dealing with loss in your life. We call it the 5 stages of grief because it's the grieving process that we go through. And these 5 stages include denial of that loss, anger about that loss or the circumstances around it, or even anger at the person who died if we happen to lose someone that we love, or even just a person that has left our life, getting angry at them. Bargaining, trying to find a way to make that loss not have actually happened, to get back to the way things were. Depression, which is a really horrible thing to go through, but it's a very common thing to go through as well. And then finally, acceptance of the new reality that we live in. And I've noticed that these 5 stages apply directly to software developers' lives, especially as an entrepreneur and somebody who's trying to bootstrap a bunch of products and services. But even within the corporate life that I've lived in the past and dealing with open source software as well, there are a lot of parallels that we can find between the 5 stages of grief and developer life, hence the 5 stages of developer grief. But before I get into these 5 stages, I want to inject my own stage 0. And I know it's probably a little bit arrogant for me to do that, but I find that it's important to get a little bit of setup and context. And that stage 0 is the frenetic energy of doing something new, of some new project, something exciting, something fun, whether it's a new client, a new idea for an open source product, a new service that you want to launch. There's this excitement that comes with doing something new. And you get down and you start coding, and you can produce some really cool things in this stage. And I've produced some pretty fun things over the last 5 or 10 years, just a few of those things up here on the screen at this point, with my podcast hosting service at Signal Leaf, my screencasts at Watch Me Code, the Marionette project that I built as open source, the Albacore project that I built as open source prior to that, my current client project, which I lovingly dubbed Project Seabass because I couldn't find a better name, and then the podcast I'm a part of as well. And you can see on my GitHub contributions screenshot there that I am pretty active in contributing to code on a very regular basis because I get really excited about code. It's fun. I like building things. I like that excitement of building things and solving problems and getting down to the point where I'm actually getting ready to deliver things. I had a delivery for a client project just a couple of weeks ago, and the energy built up in front of that was tremendous, so much to the point where after the actual delivery, my body pretty much crashed. But getting to that point, getting past the excitement and getting to the point where you are ready to deliver something introduces some potential problems. There's technical problems because we're constantly fighting things. We're constantly trying to get that framework to do what it's supposed to do, the way that we think it's supposed to work, and the way that we want it to work. And then there are the human problems as well, dealing with customers that want things that are not necessarily feasible, dealing with constantly changing requirements, all of that. And so we kind of start realizing that there's just this tremendous amount of work in front of us, and I'm constantly running into problems, and I'm burning the midnight oil trying to get these things done and fixed. And it's at this point that we start sliding into stage one, denial. And denial comes around in a couple of different ways, usually starting with the bugs that we see in our system. We as human beings make mistakes. There is no way around that. We make mistakes on a very regular basis. And it's really easy for us to deny the mistakes that we make. No, that wasn't me, not at all. I mean, no company would ever deliver a product that had any faults in it, right? No. You would never find a cell phone that loses signal when you try to hold it in your hand because you made a connection to the antenna around the outside. It would never, ever happen. There are mistakes that happen all the time, but beyond mistakes, we start to see those mistakes as a part of us, as, oh, I am flawed. I'm the problem. It's not the code. It's not the framework. It's not the technology. It's me. And we start to deny our own value as developers, as product builders, as people trying to sell things. We start to deny the value that our products have, that our services have, and the value that we have put into those and that we have provided to both our organization, our clients, or our customers. And it can be really difficult to deal with because we, as the developer, know where every last bug in the system is. We've gone through the troubleshooting and the heartache and the difficulties of making things work, and we know where every single little design trade-off was made. We know what doesn't work, even though we said it works. We know what scenarios are going to break when a customer accidentally does things in this order instead of that order. And so it's really easy to see all of that and to say, you know what? I'm sorry, I'm not going to release this thing. I'm not going to put it out there. I do this a lot as an entrepreneur trying to sell things. The very first screencast that I tried to sell, I had it recorded, I had it edited, which was like 2 minutes of editing, and I had a website built in probably 2 hours. And I found every excuse I could to not release that screencast and not actually make it available for anybody to buy. And I spent like 2 weeks making excuses to not just hit the publish button or type in the publish script, as the case were. And it's really difficult to get past that sometimes, especially when you do know all of the errors, and especially when you're working in a team or at a company for a client maybe, and it does work on your machine, but it doesn't work in production, or it doesn't work in the test environment. I mean, who here has ever said, works on my machine? Yeah. I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody else. I can't tell you how many times I've said, I'm sorry, works on my machine. It must be something wrong with the way you configured your server. It must be something wrong with, something else out of my control, because clearly it works on my machine in the perfect scenario where everything is done right, because I know not to do things in the wrong order. So the denial problem that we have kind of reverses itself. We're no longer denying the value that we've created. We're now denying the problems that other people are having. And when we start denying the problems that other people are having, whether it's with our open source framework or with the products and services that we're trying to sell, or whatever the case may be, it can lead to some arguments and lead to some frustration. And ultimately, leads to a lot of anger, where we get to stage 2. Anger is a really powerful emotion. It kind of sets us up for, millions of years ago or whatever it was, the ability to defend ourselves and to take down larger animals that were stronger than us. It's kind of this superhuman reaction of, anger and rage and tearing things apart. And, as a society, the genetics that we have in us tend to favor things like anger, because anger tends to win genetically, because the people that got angry millions of years ago killed the people that were nice, and now we only have the angry genes left in us. So it's kind of built into us to get angry, and it's kind of awful at the same time. And there's unfortunately a lot of anger going around these days, especially on social media. But it happens in other places as well. I do a lot of open source work, as I've mentioned before. And as open source projects become larger and more complex and gain more users, it gets really easy for people to forget that there is somebody actually building these things, some human being putting time and effort into these products and services that other people are using. And it becomes really easy to just rage against the problems that you're having and lash out and say horrible things about other people. And I've experienced this with Marionette in particular. I never intended Marionette to be a product or a project that other people use. I built it to solve my own needs, and it happened to solve the needs of other people as well. Side benefit of having open sourced what I was doing, a whole bunch of other people said, hey, I like the way you solved that, and started using it and started contributing. But as the community started to grow, so did the anger. Because quite frankly, I screwed the documentation up really bad. I had all this great API documentation, but I had nothing about the complete story of Marionette. You had to go to 1,000 different blog posts that were scattered all over the place, Stack Overflow, random screencasts and interviews in order to piece together what you really needed to know. And that made a lot of people angry. I got a lot of very angry emails from people trying to do something seemingly simple, and they couldn't figure it out because the documentation wasn't there. And with social media these days being what it is, it's particularly easy to lash out and make offhand comments on Twitter or Facebook or whatever your social media preference is. And one of the really big downsides of doing that in social media is kind of the snowball effect or the mob mentality that it can create. One person who happens to have a few followers that think this other person is great says something negative. Well, the followers of that person just pile on and start attacking whatever it is that the original author offhandedly made a comment about. And I've unfortunately been the person that's done that a number of times, and it's pretty awful to be the person who makes that offhand comment and see everybody else piling on. It's even worse when you're the person whose project is being attacked. So there's a lot of anger going around these days, and it's not fun. It's not enjoyable. Maybe the person that's spouting the anger and the hatred is getting some kind of, joy out of all of the attention that they get, but it's not a good situation for us to be in. It creates a lot of other problems in our culture, in our community, in software development as a whole. But if we are able to get through the anger that is directed at us or the anger that we are directing at other people, we can move on. We can get back to slogging through whatever the problems were, the issue that you had with that open source project not working the way you thought it was, or the bug that you found, the legitimate issues that we find in the products and services that we use. And sometimes as we're moving forward with these problems, we get out of the anger mode and we start getting into more of the, okay, I need to fix this. What can I do to fix this? Well, the easiest thing to do is to begin bargaining with the person that created that project. Hey, look, I've got this huge problem. I know you're busy. I've been digging into this for 3 days. I can't figure it out. I know it has something to do with this, but I don't understand the system well enough to be able to fix it. Can I pay you for your time? Can I have you come in and please, 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 please help me fix this? Because I really need to get this thing done. It's really frustrating me. And I'm really sorry about all those horrible things I said on Twitter and everything in those GitHub issues, and please just help me out here. And I see this a lot more in the entrepreneurial side of things, especially with products and services. When you build something that you're trying to sell, you start wondering why is nobody buying my stuff? I see all this traffic and nobody's buying anything. And so you start pleading with your potential customers. Hey, look, I've got all this free stuff. Come buy this and you get all these free things with it. And you start spending time dealing with the individual people. And you start asking, hey, why did you come visit my Signal Leaf podcasting service and decide not to use it? Or, hey, I see you're having this issue trying to figure out how to podcast. Can I help you? All of these bargaining tactics that we create to try and get people to pay attention to us, to use our products and services, to use our open source project. I got really lucky with Marionette and people started piling onto it, but chances are, with 99% of my other open source projects and most of what we release out there, nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to see any value. If they do see any value, they're just like, yeah, whatever. It's probably just going to go stale in a month and nobody's ever going to update it, so I don't want to attach myself to that. So you create these tactics to bargain with people and to try to get attention. And sometimes it works. You can get customers by throwing free things at them. You can get attention by blogging about the open source projects and getting on podcast interviews and whatever the case may be to talk about these things. But it's not always going to work. There will be times when people just go somewhere else to get what they need. Or they completely ignore your request to get something fixed. I dealt with a scenario recently where I was frustrated as can be with this open source project that I was working with. I spent 3.5 days between myself and my coworker at my client trying to figure out what the problem was. And it turned out to be a design decision that they had made, which was a perfectly valid design decision, but it changed the semantics of the underlying system ever so slightly. And I didn't like that change that it made. And so I'm over here screaming and yelling about this horrible thing that's broken while they're, off continuing to build other things. And my bargaining tactic was, look, I'll pay you to fix this, which eventually turned into, look, just show me what I need to do to fix this, which eventually turned into me actually fixing the code, fixing my code in order to work the way their system worked, because there was no way around that in this particular case. But going through all of these problems that we see, all of this anger that we face, all of the problems that we have with technology, all of the issues that we see in human interaction in general can lead us to some very dark places and straight down into the depths of depression at times. And if you've never dealt with depression at any level, I don't care how severe it was, if you've never dealt with depression, consider yourself extremely lucky. Because chances are somebody sitting within 10 feet of you in this room has dealt with it. I've dealt with it a number of times in my life, and it is just soul-sucking, just mind-numbing, awful. I would never wish depression on anyone, not even my worst enemies. It really, truly is devastating. And all of these problems that we see with anger out there, especially with Hacker News comments and the cesspool of negativity that it is, with all of the rage that we see on Twitter and the works on my machine, why didn't it work for you problems. All of these things build up over time. There's never the one individual thing that triggers a bout with depression. It's always a series of things, a collection of issues that bring us down and drive us into the point where we just want to hide. We don't want to deal with this anymore. We just want to crawl under our desk and not deal with anyone for any reason. And we don't want to come out because it's just too overwhelming. But if you're extremely lucky, you can get through it. There are unfortunately some people who can't. And it will lead to some horrible results at times. Suicide has been a common problem in the startup world in the last few years, with people driving themselves into the ground and not being able to get out of it because they're unwilling to talk about it. And even if it's not that extreme, there are people that are leaving the technology industry as a whole because they are facing so much backlash, especially women and people of color and people that do not fit to your standard male-female stereotypical forms that we have with gender and sexuality and all of the rage against these people that is happening these days, and it's awful. And it makes you want to crawl under your desk and hide. It makes me want to crawl under my desk and hide when I read about it. And if you're lucky, like I said, you'll find a way out of it. You'll find a way to push through it. Maybe your level of depression is, at that point where you can pull yourself up and you can get through it. But maybe you need to find some help somewhere else. But eventually, hopefully, we get through that. We find a way to power through it, to find a way to get support, find a way to get what we need, and we move on to the stage of acceptance. Where, okay, you know what? Here's this problem that I had with this open source library. It drove me mad for 3 days. I got really pissed off about it. I was ready to give up on the project and tell my client, look, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to solve this. We're going to have to. I don't know. But we figured it out eventually. We found a way around the issue through a lot of discussion and a lot of research around design patterns, and we got through it. And we got to the stage of acceptance where, you know what? Okay, I fixed this, or I found a way around it, or I know what I need to do in order to get those customers because all of the experience that I had with my bargaining tactics, which, by the way, turned out to be what we actually call marketing. So we get to the point where, yeah, okay, challenge accepted. I know there's work to be done, and I know that there's a lot of work to be done. And the work is never ending, and it's hard work, especially when we're dealing with these stages of emotion that we're going through on a regular basis. It is tremendously difficult to get through some of these stages. And there's a lot of work to do, and there's no shortcuts around these work. It's great when we see things like React that give us a whole lot of power and capabilities. But that learning curve of React, Backbone and Marionette, the learning curve, Ember.js, that learning curve, MongoDB, that learning curve. You're going to cycle through these emotions over and over and over again. And we're going to be dealing with people at every step of the way. So you look at the amount of work that you have to do right now, and then you look at the big picture, and you realize just how much work there actually is. And I like to use a little saying that my dad told me here, where he had come down, my dad and my mom had come down to help my wife and I paint our son's room just before he was born. And after about an hour of putting tape around everything in the room, I looked around and realized just how little we had accomplished in that hour. And I let out this incredibly deflated sigh. And my dad looks at me, and without asking a question, without skipping a beat, says, "Don't look at the elephant, just keep chewing." I had never heard the phrase before, but I instantly understood what he said. There is an elephant of work in front of us, and we're trying to eat this thing, and how am I ever going to get that done? There's just far too much work. But you keep chewing, and you keep chewing, and pretty soon you're up to, you're done with the hindquarters, and then you're done with the midsection, and then you're up to the neck, and then you're at the trunk, and is that another elephant holding the other end of the trunk? I'm just going to keep chewing. But it's hard work. It really is. There's a lot of work to do, especially when we're dealing with emotions and dealing with other people, and we have to learn how to work together. I mean, it's frustrating enough when we're dealing with technology that doesn't work, and all of the issues that we face trying to figure out why that framework isn't doing what I thought, how we're supposed to actually accomplish this thing that I did in Backbone all the time. What am I supposed to do in React now? I have no idea. How am I supposed to get this thing done from the technology perspective? But the human side of it makes it even more difficult because we have other humans in our midst that are dealing with other emotions that we are not currently going through. So as I'm raging at this open source project that had caused me so many days of problems, the guy that maintains it was dealing with sleep deprivation because he had a 2-month-old baby. You know, there's a lot to be said for empathy, as was talked about earlier during lunch. You know, what situation is that person dealing with? How can I not make their situation worse while still trying to get through my situation? So there's all these myriad of emotions and problems that we're facing every day. And we go through these cycles of emotion all the time. These 5 stages are not linear most of the time. Yeah, okay, when you're dealing with loss, you know, loss of friendship, loss of loved ones, loss of the things that matter most in your life, okay, it's mostly linear. I tend to personally go straight from anger to, or straight from denial to depression, kind of skipping anger when dealing with loss of loved ones. It's happened a number of times in my life, and I go straight from, you know, I don't really stop at anger for very long. But other people tend to stay there longer. Some people take a long time with denial. Some people take a long time with depression. Some people get through it all really quickly and they're done. And it varies with each individual person every time you go through these cycles. But the good news is, every time we go through these cycles, there's something to be learned. There's something about us that we can pick up. There's something about the other people that we dealt with that we can figure out. There's something about the technology that pissed us off and frustrated us that we can take out of this. There is something to be learned. And hopefully, as we go through these cycles and we get past these individual stages, we can look back at what was going on and we can take those lessons learned and we can start to move forward. And if we can all move forward, even one step forward, then our community as a whole, our company, our client projects, our customers, everybody is going to be in a better place if everybody takes one step forward. So as I've gone through these cycles, I've come up with a number of things that I've learned, a number of reflections that I've had in the last few years, especially since having really learned more about these 5 stages of grief from a number of loved ones, aunts and uncles and grandparents that I've lost in the last 10 years, 15 years or so. And so these lessons include, first and foremost, relationships are critical in our lives. Find people that you can build relationships with, whether it's in your work situation or outside of your work, whether it's in open source projects, whether you are trying to create a relationship with the people that maintain these products and projects that you're using, or whether it's just, camaraderie and friendship with other developers in your area. Find people that you can build relationships with and build friendships with so that you can have these relationships that are critical to our lives so that we can work through these problems when we have them. Secondly, anger. As horrible as it is, it's going to happen. But you have to remember that anger is a two-way street. When you get angry at that open source contributor, they're probably going to get angry right back at you. When you get an email, like I got earlier today, with somebody that says, this email course that you sent was ridiculously verbose. If I wanted to read this much garbage, I would have become a lawyer. I mean, no joke. I got that email earlier today. It's really easy to get pissed off at an email like that. But you have to remember that anger is a two-way street, and we need to take the high road whenever possible. Sometimes that high road is just stepping back, stepping away from the keyboard for 10 minutes, go punch a wall, go play video games, go play music for an hour, whatever it is you need to do to calm down, come back with a more level head and deal with the situation. Try to respond to whatever the actual problem was instead of responding to the anger. Sometimes dealing with the situation means just walking away. We're not always fortunate enough to be able to actually deal with the real problem, and we just have to walk away. And that's okay. I'm not going to reply to that guy that sent me that email earlier today. Sure, I might be able to turn it around. It's not worth my time right now because I've sent 2,000 people through that course and had 99.9% positive feedback. So, okay, maybe there is something I can learn from that, but the way that he presented his issues just made me want to punch him in the face, and I don't want to have to. I personally can't deal with that right now, so I'm not going to. I'm going to walk away. I'm just going to delete that email and move on. But when you can't move on, when you have a really hard time, when you're going through struggles, the relationships that you've built previously will become incredibly important as you begin to build a support network and a support group. And support groups are absolutely critical in anything that we do as human beings. It doesn't matter if it's your professional life or your personal life or whatever it is. For me, I have a phenomenal support group of other developers that I talk with on a regular basis. So I've got this group of 3 other guys that I meet with every Friday. We're all entrepreneurial-minded developers. Some of us are going into things that are not development-related. Some of us are continuing the development path, but we're all very close at this point. We've been talking for a little over a year and a half now, every Friday. And we happen to record our support group every Friday, and we release it as a podcast that we call the Entre Programmers. And so this is our mastermind group of entrepreneurial efforts where we talk about all of our business struggles and failures and successes and share what we're doing, even in our personal lives, because when you think about your life as a whole, yeah, okay, it's great to think about, work-life separation, but there's going to be some overlap there, and having people that understand that overlap in your life is incredibly important. And if you're interested in hearing what my particular support group sounds like, if you're an entrepreneurial-minded person at all, a software developer, designer, engineer, whatever you want to call yourself, thinking about going out and building your own products and services, do check out the Entre Programmers podcast because we cover a lot of ground in the little over a year that we've been recording this, with close to like 60 episodes now. It's a really good group. It's tremendously fun. I get so much out of it every week, and I encourage everyone in this room to find a support group of some sort, people that will understand what you're going through, whatever it is you're going through at this point in your life, professionally or otherwise. And then lastly, I want to talk about depression again. Because as I said before, there's a high likelihood that if you have not personally gone through depression, somebody else in this room has gone through either depression or some other form of mental illness, mental disabilities, whatever the problem actually is. So if you know someone, if you have been the person that has struggled, please go out to Ed Finkler's material here, Open Sourcing Mental Illness, at funkatron.com/OSMI. It is a phenomenal set of resources, of talks, papers, research, of information on how to actually get through these problems by finding the help that you really, truly need. I've been incredibly fortunate in my life to have people to help me get through depression. Not everybody is that lucky. Not everybody is willing to speak up about it. If you know somebody that is going through any kind of problem, please check out this material and get help. Because in the end, if we can push through it, this is my dream, what I'm doing right now. I cannot believe that I get to wake up every day, play with computers and technology. I build stupid little JavaScript robots. I took a $6 vegetable chopper, yanked the blade out, put a button in there, and put an Arduino device in it, and made a device that I slap really hard in order to move slides forward, and I called it the slide chop. I mean, the ridiculous things that we get to do with technology and software and all the fun that we get to have. This is an amazing time to be alive, really, truly amazing, because of all of the progress that we get to be a part of. This isn't like the Industrial Revolution that happened hundreds of years ago, where it's really difficult to create progress and you got to get a PhD in physics and everything else that you need in order to make real progress on the industrial side of things. This is a fledgling industry by all means, and we all get to be a part of this. And I encourage every one of you to get out there and do something interesting, like John was saying earlier in his Make Art, Not Apps. Do something fun, do something creative. Take React and try to merge it together with Backbone and see what happens. Go find some interesting piece of code that looks really cool, but you don't have time, and find the time to play with it. Because every time we do something new, like me really wanting to try ClojureScript now, every time we do that, we get new experience, we get something new in our lives, we get a new perspective, and we get to move forward. And that's really what this is all about. Find the people in your lives that will help you. Find the things that are interesting and fun to do. Get out there and do them, and talk to the people around you so that you can create the necessary relationships to support yourself and to support them as we move forward in this incredibly entertaining industry. Thank you.